This lecture is going to be about the fifth chapter of Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography. This chapter is titled At the High School, and as the title suggests, this chapter is about several incidents that took place while Gandhi was still at high school. So, without further ado, I'm going to go forward and look at some of the excerpts which I think are relevant. So the first one goes as follows, and as you already know from the previous chapters, that at this point Gandhi is already married to Kasturbai, and he was married off at the age of 13. So with that in mind, let's start reading. The first excerpt goes as follows: Marriage resulted in both of us wasting a year. Indeed, the result was even worse for my brother, for he gave up studies altogether. Heaven knows how many youths are in the same plight as he. Only in our present Hindu society do studies and marriage go thus hand in hand. Now, one of the reasons I think this excerpt is relevant is because in the previous chapters he has already mentioned that he does not agree with such a preposterously early marriage, right? So remember, Gandhi was married off at the age of 13, and he did not even know that he was going to be married off um, before he saw the preparations being made in his own house. And you probably are already familiar with the fact that Kasturbai was not educated at all, right? And contemporary society did not have schools for women. And wherever there were only a handful, right? There were only a few social reformers who had been doing it. You had Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar in West Bengal doing it in Kolkata and around um, many other provinces, many other places in the Bengal province. On the other hand, you had someone like Jyotirao Phule in Maharashtra, in Pune, or doing the same with Savitribai Phule, his wife. So we have isolated instances, but altogether, women's education was not a thing back then, right? It was barely even there. However, men's education was there. However, as seen with the case of Gandhi's own brother, uh, that loss of a year when the marriage took place resulted in him giving up studies altogether. And one of the reasons, as Gandhi makes it clear in this chapter, due to which he does not support such a preposterously early marriage, is the fact that when studies and marriage go hand in hand, it results in a lot of people suffering from the same plight, to use Gandhi's word. And the same plight is, of course, in reference to his own elder brother, who had to give up his studies as a result of being married off at such an early age. So uh, from this excerpt and the context in which this excerpt is mentioned, there are several takeaways, I would say. Now, of course, there is the criticism of child marriage. There is again the criticism of general early marriage, right? Because you remember, Gandhi was 13, his elder brother was 2 or 3 years older, right? And so the commentary is not just entirely on child marriage, which it of course is, but it is also about early marriage more generally, right? So Gandhi clearly does not support the idea of men or women being married off very early, to the point that their education is disrupted, right? So that's the larger point he makes here. Remember, when you are studying autobiography, you are not just studying autobiography as literature, you are also studying ideas as literature, because autobiographies, as we have seen in the case of Tagore before, I'm sure you have also seen the same with the case of all the other autobiographies you are reading, and similarly in the case of Mahatma Gandhi too, because his autobiography is full of incidents and full of ideas. In the case of Tagore, full of incidents, full of insights, full of conjecture, full of commentary, etc., etc. So once again, ideas as literature, memories as literature, ideas as literature. Understand this. Let's go forward with the next excerpt. My own recollection is that I had not any high regard for my ability as a student. If you read the chapter, you'll realize that the ability being spoken about here is Gandhi's own ability as a student, and he says he did not have any particularly high ability. At least he did not think that he was a great student or a great scholar. That idea he did not have about himself. He says, I used to be astonished whenever I won prizes and scholarships, but I very jealously guarded my character. The least little blemish drew tears from my eyes. So, you see, there are two things, uh, two aspects of Gandhi's character being brought out here. First of all, he says that as a student of high school, I was not a particularly bright student. Now, this is something he has mentioned earlier. He says that when he tries to think about the earliest memories of his school days, he can't even remember, you know, he remembers only that he was not even good in the multiplication tables, and he recollects that he was not a very bright student back then. Now you see that same uh, idea repeats in this chapter when Gandhi says that I had not any high regard for my ability as a student. And he says, I used to be surprised whenever I won prizes and scholarships, because he thought that he really wasn't good enough to win prizes or scholarships. Perhaps the other way of looking at it is probably by saying that Gandhi's standards were so high that uh, retroactively he looks back at himself and thinks of himself as having underperformed back then. So that is one of the possible readings that you may like to go with. But the comparison that he makes with his abilities as a student is his character. So on the one hand, his abilities as a student, on the other hand, his character, which he says he very jealously guarded. So you remember from the early chapters, from his childhood chapters, that uh, back when he was very little, he had come across the book and also had watched the plays related to King Harishchandra and also related to Shravan, right? Shravana Pitri Bhakti Nataka, if you remember. So these were his formative, texts or formative experiences, plays that contributed to the formation of his character. And that character of being truthful, of being, dedicated to his elders, turning a blind eye to the fault of his elders. So these are things that he guarded very jealously. And this, he says, is in contrast with his abilities as a student. And he says that whenever he realized that his character had the slightest bit of flaw or blemish, to use his word, it drew tears from his eyes. Going forward, let's see the third excerpt on this page, on this slide. So he talks about the headmaster here, the headmaster of his school, who made gymnastics and cricket compulsory for boys of the upper standards, right? And remember, he's in high school now, so he is in one of the upper standards. And he says, I disliked both meaning gymnastics and cricket. I never took part in any exercise, cricket or football, before they were made compulsory. My shyness was one of the reasons for this aloofness, which I now see was wrong. I then had the false notion that gymnastics had nothing to do with education. Today I know that physical training should have as much place in the curriculum as mental training. So this is a very important point, because why is this a very important point? Because this tells us about Gandhi's views on education. So remember, one of the possible questions that you can have here, or you can simply explore if you like, is what are Gandhi's views on education? And when his views on education are in question, obviously you must understand now and mention in your answers when you have to write it that Gandhi has a very holistic notion of education. And what is holistic? Holistic means complete, right? So he says, as just as much as mental training is necessary, mental training is, thinking exercises, the manner in which we are generally taught, right? On the other hand, physical training is also necessary. So he reminisces about his own experience as a high school student, where he memorates about, disliking all kinds of sports and exercise. And now looking back, he sees that he was wrong. And he confesses having a false notion that gymnastics had nothing to do with education, right? And ultimately, Gandhi is of the opinion that physical training should have as much place in the curriculum as mental training. All right, so that tells us about Gandhi's notions on education. Let's now move forward with the other incidents here and his other lessons related to education, of course. So he says, I'm still paying the penalty of another neglect, right? I do not know whence I got the notion that good handwriting was not a necessary part of education, but I retained it until I went to England. When later, especially in South Africa, I saw the beautiful handwriting of lawyers and young men born and educated in South Africa, I was ashamed of myself and repented of my neglect. I saw that bad handwriting should be regarded as a sign of an imperfect education. I tried later to improve mine, but it was too late. Okay, so again, an answer to the question, what are Gandhi's views on education? So you already saw that he gives equal importance to physical education as much as to mental education. Now, here again, in this excerpt, which I just read to you, he gives a lot of importance to good handwriting, right? And once again, he says that I had a very faulty notion being that handwriting is not really that important. You can write scratch like a doctor and you can get away with it. Um, but he says when he went to England and then again when he went to South Africa where he practiced law, he was, awestruck by the by the beautiful handwriting of the lawyers and young men educated, born and educated in South Africa. And he says he was ashamed of himself when he realized that he had, neglected such an important part of education. And then he goes on to say that now I know that this too um, is a sign of imperfect education. Whenever someone has a bad handwriting, it signifies, it works as a marker of that person not being perfectly educated. And he, Gandhi, even suffered for not having paid enough attention to it early in his life, because he said he tried to improve his handwriting, but it was of no use because it was too late. His hand was, had its own um, his hand had its own mind when it came to writing, because after an age it becomes difficult to, improve your handwriting and all. It does become difficult. So yes, this is something which should be practiced early on. That is not just Gandhi's advice. I agree with this notion. All right, let's go forward and look at the next one. Let every young man and woman be warned by my example and understand that good handwriting is a necessary part of education. I am now of the opinion that children should first be taught the art of drawing before learning how to write. Let the child learn his letters by observation as he does different objects, such as flowers, birds, etc. And let him learn handwriting only after he has learned to draw objects. He will then write beautifully. He will then write a beautifully formed hand. So, you see, the interesting thing here to note is that Gandhi does not just have the notion that uh, a good handwriting is necessary to claim complete or perfect education. He does say that, but he also, you know, gives a kind of way forward. He does not just does not provide a hypothesis and close the chapter. He provides his hypothesis, he gives his reasons, and he also shows a procedure, a scheme by which, the education system can work forward to improve the handwriting or ensure that the students have good handwriting. And what is this mechanism or the schema that he suggests? He suggests that children should first learn the art of drawing, and then they should be taught to, you know they should be told, or they should be taught to draw letters by observation, just like children draw flowers and birds and every other of little houses and other objects that children draw as children, right? And Gandhi is of the opinion that if drawing is how handwriting teaching starts, then definitely every student will have a beautifully formed hand. Okay. Finally, in this chapter, we are going to get to know Gandhi's notions about language teaching, right? How should the curriculum be? So, To the answer, how should the curriculum be? Gandhi has already provided us several answers. Give equal importance to mental training as much as to physical training. Actually, give as much importance to physical training as to mental training. I should have juxtaposed it. The second important point he makes is about handwriting. And finally, Gandhi shares his opinions about language teaching. And with that, we'll end this chapter. It is now my opinion, he says, that in all Indian curricula of higher education, there should be a place for Hindi, Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, and English, besides, of course, the vernacular. Vernacular meaning the regional language. Urdu, I have not regarded as a distinct language because it has adopted the Hindi grammar and its vocabulary is mainly Persian and Arabic. And he who would learn good Urdu must learn Persian and Arabic. As one who would learn good Gujarati, Hindi, Bengali, or Marathi must learn Sanskrit. So not much explaining to do here, but language education for Gandhi is also fundamental. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities of language learning as it is practiced or as Gandhi suggests here, but I will leave you with the thought that Gandhi, you must note that Gandhi puts emphasis on many languages, languages which are widely spoken in the country. For example, Hindi is spoken by around today to 40 to 43% of the Indian people speak Hindi. Even though a majority of the Indian people do not speak Hindi, 40% of Indians, a little bit more than 40% of Indians do speak Hindi. So at a national scale, he gives importance to Hindi. Sanskrit, Persian, and Arabic are all ancient languages, and he gives them importance because those are the source languages for languages such as Gujarati, Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, which derive from Sanskrit on the one hand, and on the other hand, Urdu, which derives from Persian and Arabic. But finally, note that he also gives importance to English, which he acknowledges surely as a language currency, a lingua franca, right? A language which can be used a currency everywhere in the world. And last but not the least, he puts a good deal of emphasis on the vernacular language, on the regional language. So if Gandhi were to design the curriculum, you could see that he chooses one language of international value, right, which can be used in many places across the world. Then he chooses Hindi, which, like I said, I gave you some stats from the, which I'm aware from the census data, where approximately 43% of the Indian population speak Hindi. Um, and so he gives it importance because in many places, at least much of North India speaks Hindi, right? So that is given importance. But he also gives importance to Sanskrit, Persian, and Arabic, which are root languages or source languages for many of the vernacular languages. So on the one hand, you have Urdu, and on the other hand, you have all regional languages, not all perhaps, but most of the regional languages such as Gujarati, Hindi, Bengali, and Marathi. So the bottom line for for this chapter is, of course, begins with Gandhi's criticism of early marriage, child marriage, and then Gandhi's notion of what a good educational curriculum should be like. With this, we end chapter 5.